So imagine you were standing behind this heavy velvet curtain, right? Or, well, maybe you're just staring at that little green camera light on your laptop. Your name is about to be called.
Yeah, the classic moment of dread.
Exactly. And your heart is hammering against your ribs so violently you can actually hear it in your ears. Like your palms are sweating, your breathing gets super shallow, and your mind, which, I mean, just 3 minutes ago was perfectly sharp, is rapidly dissolving into white noise.
Right. It's a total biological mismatch.
It really is.
Yeah.
Why does the human body react to giving a toast or, updating a project status in a Zoom meeting the exact same way it reacts to being chased by an apex predator?
It's nuts.
But what if that paralyzing fear, the very thing that makes incredibly competent people reject leadership roles and shy away from visibility, what if that is actually a highly useful, misdiagnosed biological mechanism?
That's the real question.
Right. What if conquering that specific fear is the absolute fastest shortcut to establishing undeniable self-confidence in, well, basically every other area of your life?
See, to get there, it requires a complete reframing of how we view stage fright. And honestly, a reframing of human biology itself.
How so?
Well, instead of treating the anxiety of public speaking as this, personal defect or a psychological flaw, we really have to look at the empirical evidence of what is happening in the central nervous system.
Like the actual physical response.
Exactly. That physical response, the cortisol spike, the adrenaline dump, is nature's way of preparing the human organism to meet an unusual, high-stakes challenge. I mean, it is literally the mobilization of energy.
Okay, so it's a feature, not a bug.
Right. But the tragedy is that most people interpret that sudden surge of energy as terror. They feel the physiological shift, they assume they're breaking down, and they psychologically retreat.
Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Today, we are delivering a complete, comprehensive audio replacement for Dale Carnegie's classic manual, The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Speaking.
It's such a foundational text.
It really is. And by the time we finish this conversation today, you will have every key, model, and method necessary to transform from a nervous, avoidant speaker into a persuasive, confident communicator. You won't need to read the book, because we are unpacking the exact formulas to organize your thoughts on the fly, command an audience's attention, and get people to actually take action.
And to be clear, we aren't just going to give you a dry list of rules.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. We're going to examine the psychology of why these techniques work, whether you are in a boardroom in 2026 or, an auditorium in 1950.
Which is important because to understand the weight of these methods, we have to establish why Dale Carnegie remains the ultimate authority on this subject. I mean, why have his insights survived for over a century?
Right. He started teaching this a long time ago.
Yeah, she began teaching public speaking in 1912.
Wait, 1912, like the exact same year the Titanic sank.
The exact same year. And the context of that era is super crucial for understanding the revolution he started, because at that time, public speaking was treated almost exclusively as an elite fine art.
Oh, like fancy debates and stuff.
Yeah, it was called the art of elocution. So it involved studying these rigid mechanics of voice production and choreographed, formalized gestures.
Like you're in a play or something.
Exactly. The strict rules of classical rhetoric. It was designed to produce these silver-tongued orators who sounded like they were delivering a theatrical Shakespearean performance.
Right, which is not how normal people talk.
Not at all. And Carnegie completely disrupted the field by stripping away all that artificiality. He treated speaking as a practical, accessible skill that any normally intelligent person could acquire.
So it wasn't for actors anymore.
Right. His methods were for the business professional who needed to give a clear report, or the community member who needed to advocate for a local cause. And the efficacy of his approach is just staggering. I mean, his methods have successfully trained well over 750,000 people.
That's incredible. And it shows that whether you are prepping for a high-stakes investor pitch, a wedding toast, or a local PTA meeting, the mechanics of human attention remain exactly the same.
Completely unchanged.
But before we can get into the architectural formulas of structuring a speech, how to open, how to close, how to persuade, we really have to dismantle the absolute biggest barrier to speaking. We have to solve the problem of fear.
And the book is remarkably clear on this point. The first fact you must accept, just to lower your baseline anxiety, is that you are not unique in your fear.
Everyone feels it.
Everyone. Surveys of college students in speech classes show that up to 90% suffer from stage fright initially.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah, and among adults in the professional world, it is closer to 100%.
So it's basically universal.
Exactly. The second fact, which you kind of alluded to in the opening, is that this fear is biological preparation.
The adrenaline dump.
Right. Your pulse beats faster and your respiration speeds up because your body is literally flooding your system with oxygen. If you learn to hold those physiological preparations within limits, if you relabel that anxiety as excitement, that exact same adrenaline will make you think faster, talk more fluently, and speak with far greater intensity than you ever could in a normal, relaxed state.
I love the analogy the text uses here. It says you want to be like a racehorse, not a draft horse.
Yes.
Even the professionals never completely lose the nerves. Like experienced speakers often feel that surge of anxiety right before they speak, and it can persist through the first few sentences.
Absolutely do.
There's this great line. A speaker who claims to be as cool as a cucumber is usually as thick-skinned as a cucumber and just about as inspiring to listen to.
That's so true.
Right. The goal is not the elimination of nerves. It is the management and channeling of that energy.
Precisely. Because the root cause of the fear is simply uncertainty and a lack of habituation. Professor James Harvey Robinson actually states that fear is misbegotten of ignorance and uncertainty.
Meaning we're just scared because we aren't used to it.
Basically, yeah. Public speaking is a complex series of strange situations for a beginner. You are the center of attention. The silence feels heavy. The social stakes feel monumental. The way to make it simple is to build a record of successful experiences.
Which sounds easier said than done.
Well, the book shares this amazing historical story of Albert Edward Wigham. He was a prominent lecturer, but in college, he tried to deliver a speech that began with the line, "Adams and Jefferson are no more."
Okay, very dramatic opening.
Very. But he panicked, gasped out that they had passed away, and literally just sat down to uproarious, humiliating laughter.
Oh no, that is literally everyone's worst nightmare.
He was physically ill for days. He believed he would never, ever speak again.
But then he found something he actually cared about, right? Because the political campaign of 1896 happened.
Right.
And he became so incensed reading this pamphlet on a political issue that he actually pawned his watch, traveled back to his home state, and volunteered to speak.
He was that fired up.
Exactly. And the memory of his college disaster swept over him. He choked, he stammered, but he managed to live through the introduction.
He survived it.
He did. And encouraged by that tiny survival, he just kept talking. He thought he spoke for 15 minutes. He actually spoke for an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. He inadvertently built what the psychologist William James calls the habit of success. And he went on to make his living as a professional speaker.
Which brings us to the most critical operational rule for building that habit of success and guaranteeing confidence. And this is like a thunderous warning from Carnegie that contradicts what almost every beginner instinctively wants to do.
Okay, what is it?
You must never, ever memorize a talk word for word.
Okay, I have to interject here, because I know exactly what someone listening is thinking right now, mostly because I used to do this myself.
Oh, I did too?
Right. If you are terrified of standing up and having your mind go completely blank, isn't writing out the speech and memorizing it the ultimate safety net? I mean, it feels like the only way to guarantee you won't fail.
It totally feels that way.
To use a modern analogy, memorizing a speech feels like driving with your GPS set to a highly specific turn-by-turn route. You know exactly where you are going.
It feels like a safety net, but cognitive science actually proves it is a trap. To stick with your GPS analogy, when you rely on turn-by-turn directions, if there's a sudden detour, like if someone drops a glass in the audience, or if you simply forget one single word, the GPS crashes.
You just freeze.
Completely. You have no mental map of the actual terrain, so you are completely lost. When you memorize, you're not communicating, you are reciting.
That's a great distinction.
Yeah, you are engaging semantic memory, trying to recall static words rather than episodic memory, where you dynamically share ideas. And the book provides these devastating case studies to prove this.
Like the Kaltenborn story.
Yes. H.V. Kaltenborn, the famed American news commentator. He entered a speech contest at Harvard, chose a short story, memorized it perfectly, and rehearsed it like hundreds of times.
Bulletproof, theoretically.
Right. He stood up, announced the title, and his mind went entirely black.
Oh, man.
In pure desperation, he abandoned the script and just started telling the story in his own natural words. And you know what happened? He won first prize. And he never memorized a speech again.
Because it forced him to just be natural.
Exactly. And even Winston Churchill fell into this trap.
Really? Churchill?
Yeah. As a young man in Parliament, he tried to deliver a memorized speech, stopped dead in his mental tracks, started his last sentence over, and blanked again. He had to sit down in absolute humiliation.
We see this happen in modern tech keynotes all the time.
Oh, constantly.
A CEO steps out onto the stage, the teleprompter glitches, and suddenly this brilliant executive is just frozen, staring blankly at the audience, entirely unable to explain the product they spent 3 years building.
It's so painful to watch.
The mechanics of the failure are fascinating, though, because if you write out a speech, your phrasing is literary. It is stiff, it's inflexible, and it's meant for the eye, not the ear.
Right, spoken English is very different from written English.
Exactly. When we converse naturally, we do not think in words. We think in ideas. If our ideas are clear, the words follow unconsciously. But the moment you try to recall a specific written word, your natural delivery just dies.
And that leads to the Vance Bushnell story, which is just wild.
Oh, tell that one. It's unbelievable.
So Vance Bushnell was this executive who had to speak to 2,000 representatives. He wrote out his talk, memorized it, and rehearsed it 40 times in front of a mirror. He had every single gesture perfectly programmed.
Sounds exhausting.
And the result was a catastrophe. He got to the stage, said his opening line, and blinked. In his confusion, he took 2 steps backward to restart. He blinked again. He took 2 more steps backward.
Oh no, I know where this is going.
And the platform had no railing. On his 4th attempt to restart, he stepped backward right off the edge of the 5-foot platform and just disappeared.
That is horrific.
The audience howled with laughter, thinking it was a physical comedy act.
A perfectly rehearsed pratfall.
Exactly. He learned the hard way that memorization courts disaster.
So, okay, what is the actual solution for preparation then? If we don't write a script, how do we prepare without feeling like we're stepping out onto a tightrope without a net?
You transition from the GPS to a compass.
The compass.
Yeah. You assemble ideas, not words. You search your background, you gather your convictions, and you put your ideas down as brief notes, just a few words to fix the concept. It's like a spatial mapping of ideas.
Just bullet points, basically.
Barely even that, just concepts. Then you rehearse by casually talking out the ideas in everyday conversation.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you lean across a lunch table with a friend and say, I was thinking about our new marketing strategy the other day, and you just watch their reaction. You find the natural wording because you are conversing, not declaiming. You are building neural pathways to the ideas, so when you get on stage, you simply follow those pathways.
That approach inherently builds confidence because it relies on your natural communication skills. But the book also introduces a psychological catalyst for confidence drawn from William James, which is incredibly relevant.
The acting confident principle.
Right. James noted that we assume emotion dictates action, like we feel brave and therefore we act brave. But psychological research and modern theories like the facial feedback hypothesis show that action and feeling go together.
It's a two-way street.
Exactly. By regulating the physical action, which is under the direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not.
To feel brave, act brave. If you lose your spontaneous cheerfulness, the sovereign path to regaining it is to sit up cheerfully and speak as if cheerfulness were already there.
Fake it till you make it, essentially.
In a physical sense, yes. When you face an audience, act as if you already have courage. Breathe deeply for 30 seconds before you step up. The oxygen physically buoys you. Draw yourself up to your full height, look the audience straight in the eyes, and begin to talk as confidently as if every person in the room owed you money.
I absolutely love that visualization. Imagine they are assembled there to beg you for an extension of credit.
It works.
It instantly changes your physical posture, which in turn changes your psychological dominance. Theodore Roosevelt actually used this exact method.
Really?
Yeah, he was a sickly, awkward, nervous, and distrustful boy. But he read a passage in a book where a naval captain explained that almost every man is frightened when going into action. But the course to follow is to keep such a grip on yourself that you act as if you are not frightened.
That's powerful.
And if you keep that pretense up long enough, it changes into reality. Roosevelt acted as if he were not afraid, and by sheer dint of practicing physical fearlessness, his neurology caught up, and he became one of the boldest leaders in history.
Wow. So posture and breathing can hack your biology, but posture alone won't save you if you have nothing of value to say, right?
True.
Where does the actual substance come from? This leads to the foundational philosophy of the entire Carnegie method. A successful speech requires earning the right to talk, being excited about the subject, and being eager to share it.
Those 3 things.
If you have those 3 elements, the mechanics of delivery will largely take care of themselves.
Let's unpack that first requirement, earning the right to talk. This is crucial because people misinterpret it all the time.
They think it means credentials.
Exactly. They think it means you need a PhD or decades of academic research or a fancy title on your door. But earning the right actually means talking about what life has taught you.
Right, personal experience.
The text points out this massive mistake countless speakers make. They get asked to speak, and they decide they must tackle this massive, abstract subject like patriotism or the future of AI or macroeconomics.
And they just hit Google.
Yes. They spend hours frantically searching through Wikipedia, and they throw together a bunch of generalizations. The result is a boring, lifeless, unearned editorial.
Because audiences do not want abstract editorials unless they are delivered by someone who has actually spent their life earning the right to editorialize on that specific topic.
Like an actual economist.
Right. Audiences want the news. They want your personal experience. The text describes an instructor stopping a student who is giving this high-flown, abstract speech about liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Very philosophical.
Too philosophical. The instructor asked the student why he actually believed what he was saying. And stripped of all that pretension, the student then told an incredible, harrowing story about his own experiences as a refugee, which had the class absolutely spellbound.
It is the exact same mechanism that makes unscripted podcasts or television talk shows so incredibly compelling today.
Oh, completely.
You have plain, ordinary people, not trained communicators, holding the attention of millions of viewers. Why? Because they are talking about their most embarrassing moments or a specific hurdle they overcame. They're talking about what life taught them.
And no one can argue with that.
Exactly. They have earned the right to tell that specific story, and therefore they are the absolute world authority on that topic. No one can contradict your own lived experience.
And that leads directly to the next requirement. You must be excited about the subject.
Genuine enthusiasm.
Yes. The text shares the story of a man training bank employees to speak during a financial thrift campaign. One speaker was failing completely because he was just reciting economic facts, like dry data.
Snore.
Right, so the instructor told him to go off and think about the reality of his subject to realize that probate records show 85% of people leave absolutely nothing at all at death.
That's a grim stat.
But a motivating one. He had to realize he was not asking for a favor. He was preparing people to have meat and bread in their old age. He had to become a crusader.
He had to find the stakes.
Exactly. Once he fired up his own mind with the vital importance of his message, his delivery completely changed. It rang with conviction. He became audience-centered, not self-centered.
Okay, so we have dismantled the fear by reframing it as energy. We have committed to assembling ideas instead of memorizing a script.
Yeah.
And we understand we must speak from our own earned experience with excitement.
The foundation is set.
But how do we actually construct the architecture of the speech? Like, how do we structure the content so that the audience's brain is forced to pay attention? This brings us to the absolute necessity of limiting the subject and developing reserve power.
Yes. A common compulsion for speakers, especially when they are nervous, is to try and cover way too much ground.
They want to brain dump.
They want to prove they know everything. The book gives the extreme example of a young man trying to speak on Athens from 500 BC to the Korean War in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes.
Yeah. He barely got past the founding of the city before his time was up. But even experienced speakers make this mistake on a smaller scale. If you are giving a short presentation, you can only make 1 or 2 points. If you are giving a 30-minute talk, you can only successfully cover 4 or 5 main ideas.
Because of cognitive load?
Exactly. Cognitive load theory tells us that working memory can only hold a few items at a time. If you try to cover the entire history of a project, the audience will just hear a blur of noise. You must narrow your subject down to a highly specific area.
And once you have narrowed that subject, you must develop what the book calls reserve power. I find this concept fascinating. It is essentially the iceberg theory of knowledge.
Right.
The idea is that you must gather 10 to 100 times more information than you will actually use. John Gunther, the famous journalist, operated on this principle. You assemble 100 thoughts around your theme, and then you discard 90 of them.
Why discard them?
Because the knowledge of those 90 discarded facts gives your delivery an underlying weight and authority that the audience can subconsciously feel.
Ah, like a doctor. A surgeon can teach you how to physically remove an appendix in 10 minutes, but it takes 4 years of medical school to learn what to do if something goes wrong.
Perfect analogy.
Reserve power prepares you for any emergency, a change of emphasis, a technical glitch, or a hostile question from the audience. And the best way to build reserve power is to select your topic far in advance.
Don't wait until the night before.
No, if you decide on your topic weeks ahead of time, your subconscious mind goes to work. While you are driving, waiting for a coffee, or doing chores, you are mulling over the subject, pulling in observations from your daily life, and deepening your understanding.
And that deep understanding allows you to deploy the most powerful weapon a speaker has: concrete details.
This is huge.
This is where we get into the psychology of how the brain processes language. The difference between a weak speaker and a strong speaker is the difference between saying a fowl and saying a white bantam rooster with a broken leg.
The specificity.
Right. The word fowl is an abstraction. It just floats away.
Yeah.
The phrase white bantam rooster with a broken leg forces the audience's visual cortex to paint a specific picture. You're basically hijacking their sensory processing.
And the book quotes Abraham Lincoln's brilliant rule for balancing that brevity with specific detail. Lincoln said, "When I send a man to buy a horse, I don't want to be told how many hairs the horse has in his tail. I wish only to know his points."
Give me the details that matter.
Exactly. You don't want useless clutter, but you need the exact, specific details that carry weight. The French philosopher Alain said that an abstract style is always bad. Your sentences should be full of stones, metals, chairs, tables, animals, men, and women. You have to answer the reporter's questions: who, when, where, what, and why.
You visualize by demonstrating. Like if you were talking about how to swing a golf club, don't just describe the physics. Stand up, use your arms, and physically show the swing.
Visuals always win.
Science tells us that the nerves leading from the eye to the brain are much larger than those from the ear. We give 25 times as much attention to visual suggestions. One seeing is better than 100 times telling.
And alongside concrete details, you must vitalize the talk through sheer earnestness. We see this in the famous historical case of bluegrass versus hickory wood ashes.
Oh, this story's wild.
It really is. In a speaking class, a student gave a passionate, fiery speech arguing that you could grow bluegrass by planting hickory wood ashes.
Which is botanically impossible.
Completely unscientific, ridiculous, and provably false. Yet his delivery was so earnest, his gestures so impassioned, and his voice so full of conviction that he almost won the audience over.
Passion overrides pure logic. We see this in modern politics and social media every single day.
Unfortunately, yes.
Right. If a speaker believes a thing earnestly enough and says it earnestly enough, they will get adherence to their cause, even if they are arguing for botanical impossibilities. Now, imagine how much more compelling your convictions will be when they are actually aligned with common sense and truth.
You're unstoppable.
You have to relive the feelings you have about your topic. Don't act like a disinterested third-party observer to your own life. If you were telling a story about a massive failure at your startup, don't repress the frustration you felt. The audience wants to experience the emotion.
And to achieve that emotional connection, you have to establish an audience partnership. You must talk in terms of your listeners' interests.
Make it about them.
Always. Russell Conwell delivered his famous lecture, Acres of Diamonds, nearly 6,000 times.
6,000 times. How did he not go crazy?
Right. How did he keep it fresh? He arrived in the town early. He interviewed the local barber, the postmaster, the school principal. He found out the history of the town and the opportunities the local people had. When he gave his lecture, he wove those local specific details into the fabric of his speech.
Oh, that's brilliant.
He made the audience feel the talk was created specifically for them. If we adapt that for today, like if you were presenting to a new department, don't use your generic slide deck. Spend 20 minutes beforehand talking to the junior employees in that department. Find out what software they are frustrated with and weave that specific frustration into your opening.
You talk in terms of their interests, and crucially, you play yourself down. The surest way to antagonize an audience is to project an air of superiority. You can be modest without being apologetic. Humility inspires trust.
So true. Okay, so we have the foundation of confidence, and we know we must use specific, vitalized content tailored to the audience. Now we must align our speech with a specific goal.
The actual purpose of the talk.
Right. Every talk, whether the speaker realizes it or not, has one of 4 major purposes: to get action, to inform, to convince, or to entertain.
And we're going to break down the exact formulas for the first 3, starting with the most common and arguably most important: the talk to get action.
Yes.
This is the magic formula. If you are listening to this right now and you want to know how to get your team to adopt a new protocol or how to get investors to write a check, this is the architecture. The magic formula for action is a 3-step structure. Example, point, reason. It is designed to quickly and efficiently persuade an audience to take a specific action.
Let's analyze the allocation of time in this formula because it is counterintuitive. Step 1 is the example. You should spend fully 75% of your speaking time on this step.
Wait, 75% on just the story? Why so much?
You recount a single, vivid, personal incident. The book gives the example of a speaker telling a harrowing story of a child nearly being injured by an overturned power mower. Why spend 75% of your time on a story? Because human beings are deeply resistant to being told what to do.
Nobody likes bossy people.
Exactly. Psychological reactance theory shows that when people feel their freedom is being restricted, like when you give them a direct order, they push back. But if you tell a story, their psychological defenses drop. They engage their visual imagination, they project themselves into the narrative. You bypass their resistance completely.
And the incident must be a single event.
Right.
Not a vague summary of multiple events.
Right, one specific moment in time.
You start the talk immediately with the detail of the example. You don't say, today I want to talk about safety protocols. You say, last Tuesday at 4 p.m., I was in my backyard when I heard a scream from my neighbor's driveway.
Boom, you're in it.
You use abundant detail, you relive the experience, and you bring the audience to the climax of the story.
And once the audience is emotionally engaged and the narrative tension is at its peak, you execute. Step 2. The point. This must be brief, clear, and specific. You state exactly what the audience should do.
No vague generalities?
None. You do not ask for mental actions like be safe or be patriotic. Those are too vague to act upon. You ask for an overt physical action. Not be safe around equipment, but move your children completely inside the house before you start your power mower. You make it incredibly easy for the listener to understand precisely what is expected of them.
And finally, step 3, the reason. You highlight the exact benefit the audience will receive by taking this action. This reason must be directly relevant to the example you just told.
So don't list 20 reasons.
No laundry lists.
Yeah.
You give one core compelling reason. If you move your children inside, you will guarantee you never have to experience the terror of rushing a child to the emergency room with a mower injury.
It's so clean.
Example, point, reason. It works perfectly because it hooks the emotion first, provides a clear directive, and rationalizes it with a benefit.
Now, what if your goal is not to get the audience to take an immediate physical action, but simply to educate them? This requires a different framework, the talk to inform.
Okay, what's the structure for that?
The structure here is an explanation that restricts the subject, enumerates points clearly, and crucially, compares the strange to the familiar.
Well, we already discussed restricting the subject.
Okay.
And enumeration is straightforward. You literally number your points as you make them to act as verbal signposts. Point 1, point 2.
Exactly.
But the true secret to the informative talk is comparing the strange to the familiar. You must translate abstract data into relatable images.
And the book provides a brilliant historical example regarding the automatic defroster on a refrigerator.
Oh, this is a great one.
Instead of using complex thermodynamics to explain it, the speaker compares the frost on the cooling coils to a blanket wrapped around a block of ice.
A blanket.
Yeah. The blanket keeps the heat away so the ice doesn't melt. In a refrigerator, the frost acts as a blanket, preventing the coils from pulling heat out of the food compartment. Therefore, the motor has to work harder. The defroster prevents the blanket from forming.
That makes perfect sense.
It instantly translates a mechanical process into an image everyone intuitively understands.
If we modernize that, it's exactly how great tech leaders explain complex software. Like, if you need to explain cloud computing to a non-technical board, you don't talk about server farms and data packets.
Their eyes would glaze over.
Instantly, you say, imagine you used to have to generate your own electricity in your backyard. It was expensive and broke down constantly. Cloud computing is just plugging into the municipal power grid. We manage the power plant. You just flip the switch.
That's perfect.
You have to ruthlessly avoid technical jargon. The rule of thumb from the text is to center your explanation on a small child. If a child can understand the analogy, the executives will understand it.
Okay, so explaining a concept is one thing. But what happens when the audience is actively hostile to your idea? How do you break through that psychological armor? This brings us to the talk to convince.
I'm thinking about the Dunning-Kruger effect here, or like the backfire effect. When you try to convince someone, giving them facts often makes them double down on their incorrect belief. Is convincing an audience really that different from informing them? If I give them the correct information, won't they naturally be convinced?
Logically, one might think so. But psychologically, they are vastly different. Informing is about achieving cognitive clarity. Convincing is about overcoming psychological resistance.
The ego.
Exactly. When you are trying to convince someone, you are usually asking them to change a deeply held belief or opinion. Information alone rarely overcomes the ego's defense of its own beliefs. As Professor Robinson noted, we find ourselves filled with an illicit passion for our beliefs when anyone proposes to rob us of them. It is our self-esteem that is threatened.
That is so true. So how do you overcome the backfire effect? How do you convince someone without triggering their defensive ego?
The method is to get a yes response immediately.
A yes response.
You must never start a talk by saying, "I am going to prove you wrong." That instantly hardens their hearts. You must find common ground. The psychologist Walter Dill Scott explained that every idea that enters the mind is held as true unless hindered by a contradictory idea. The goal is to set the psychological processes moving in an affirmative direction.
This reminds me of the billiard ball analogy from the book.
Yes, exactly.
If you propel a billiard ball in one direction, it takes force to deflect it, and far more force to send it backward. If a person says no and means it, their entire neuromuscular system gathers itself into a condition of rejection. But if you get them saying yes, the organism is in an accepting, forward-moving attitude.
Abraham Lincoln was an absolute master of this technique. When debating highly inflammable subjects, he would spend the first 30 minutes of his speech finding common ground.
30 minutes. Just agree.
Just agreeing. His opponents would find themselves agreeing with every single word he uttered. He got them saying yes, yes, yes. Then, gently, little by little, he would lead them off into his own fold.
That's kind of sneaky, but brilliant.
He convinced them by making his argument seem like a mutual search for an answer, rather than a frontal assault on their intelligence. You apply this in a modern meeting by starting with shared goals. You don't say, "Your marketing plan is too expensive." You say, "We all agree that maximizing ROI is the top priority this quarter, right?"
Yeah.
Yes. And we agree that customer acquisition costs have risen. Yes. So let's look at how we can optimize this spend.
You pave the road with yeses. That covers prepared talks. But what happens when you have absolutely no time to prepare?
The dreaded impromptu speech.
Think about the last time you were in a Zoom meeting, staring at the grid of faces, and your boss unexpectedly says, "Hey, let's hear your thoughts on this." That deer in the headlights feeling is universal. How do we survive the impromptu talk?
The framework for thinking on your feet is to utilize the here and now and jump instantly into a personal example.
Okay, how does that work?
First rule. Do not apologize. The audience expects you to be unprepared. Instead, use the strategy developed by Douglas Fairbanks and Charlie Chaplin.
The actors.
Yeah, they played a game where they drew random topics out of a hat and had to speak for 60 seconds without stopping. The secret they learned is that you must immediately launch into a specific story.
So if the topic is supply chain logistics,
Yeah.
you don't try to formulate a grand theory on the spot. You say, this reminds me of the bottleneck we faced with the European vendor last November.
Yes.
But why a story? Because recounting a memory is cognitively easy. It doesn't require a massive working memory. Second, it gets you into the physical swing of speaking, shaking off the initial adrenaline spike. Third, it instantly hooks the audience's attention. While you are telling the story, your brain has time to formulate the main point you want to make at the end of it. It acts as a cognitive buffer.
And if you can't think of a story, you use the principle of the here and now. You comment on what the previous speaker just said. You talk about the specific occasion that brought everyone together. And crucially, even though it is impromptu, you must finish strong.
Don't just fade out.
Right. You don't just trail off into silence with a "so, yeah." You summarize your main thought and pass the baton back firmly.
Okay, now that we have the frameworks for what to say, whether we are driving to action, informing, convincing, or speaking off the cuff, we need to master the architecture of how to deliver it from the very first word to the very last. Let's start with a highly specific but universally butchered occasion. Introducing another speaker.
Oh, most introductions are agonizingly bad.
So bad.
They're either rambling apologies, they steal the speaker's thunder, or they are just a dry recitation of a LinkedIn profile. The book provides the TIS formula for introductions. State the topic, the importance, and the speaker. Key stands for topic. You start by giving the exact title of the speaker's talk. I stands for importance. You bridge the gap between the topic and the specific interests of this particular audience. Why should they care right now? S stands for speaker. You list the speaker's specific qualifications that have earned them the right to talk on this subject, and you end by clearly and enthusiastically announcing their name.
It's a perfect template.
A TIS introduction keeps it under 1 minute, builds anticipation, and serves the speaker rather than distracting from them.
And what if you are the main event? The rules for opening a longer talk are absolute. Never open with an apology like I didn't have much time to prepare, and never ever open with a canned funny joke.
Please, no jokes.
Right. The audience will see right through the insecurity, and 99% of the time, the joke falls flat and kills your credibility.
Instead, use an arresting fact. One speaker opened a talk by stating that the divorce rate was climbing so fast that in 50 years, 1 in 2 marriages would end on the rocks.
It makes you gasp.
It jolts you awake. Or build suspense. Describe a mysterious scenario and delay the reveal. Or ask for a show of hands. How many of you have ever felt completely overwhelmed by your inbox? It instantly creates audience participation and breaks the invisible wall between speaker and listener.
And when it comes time to close the talk, you do not trail off. The close is the most strategic element of the speech because of the recency effect. People remember the last thing they hear best. You summarize your main points clearly, and you ask for a specific immediate action. You leave them with a definitive conclusion.
Finally, we must distill Carnegie's ultimate view on delivery, which threads through everything we've discussed today. Do not imitate others. Do not try to adopt the mannerisms of a famous TED speaker or a charismatic politician.
Be yourself.
Public speaking is simply enlarged conversation. You must use the exact same natural distinctiveness, the same facial expressions, the same conversational cadences you use when passionately debating a friend at a dinner table. You just dial up the volume and the energy to reach the back of the room. A good speaker is like a clean window. You don't notice the window, you just see the light coming through it.
That is a beautiful way to put it. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, transitioning from the biology of fear to the architecture of persuasion. Let's boil this entire deep dive down into a ranked list of the 3 most actionable takeaways. What should you do first, second, and third?
Number 1, stop memorizing scripts. It is the single biggest cause of stage fright and catastrophic failure. Transition from the GPS to the compass. Outline your ideas spatially and rehearse them casually in daily conversations to build neurological pathways to your natural wording.
Number 2, use the example, point, reason structure whenever you need to drive action. Whether it is a board of directors or a neighborhood committee, bypass their psychological resistance by leading with a personal story that takes up the majority of your time, then state a specific action and give them a clear benefit.
Number 3, banish apologies and bad jokes from your openings forever. Start every presentation by hijacking the audience's attention with an arresting fact, a physical prop, or a suspenseful narrative.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the mechanics of effective speaking, I want to leave you with a final reflection to mull over. If public speaking is truly just enlarged conversation, as Carnegie insists, then your daily casual chats are actually the practice ground for your public leadership. The next time you tell a story to a friend over coffee, ask yourself, are you using vivid visual details? Are you showing genuine enthusiasm? Are you structuring the narrative to keep their attention? Because the way you speak to one person is the exact blueprint for how you will eventually inspire 1,000. So much of the fear that defeats people comes from viewing the stage or the boardroom as an alien environment, a place where normal communication breaks down. But the truth is, the mechanics of human connection are exactly the same under the spotlight as they are across the kitchen table. You just have to realize you already know how to have the conversation.